What I'm really driving at, I suppose, is that once upon a time there was David Bowie, and then there was the band, a band.
Yeah.
Have you tired, perhaps, of carrying all the responsibility on your own shoulders, or is this just a natural progression for you?
Well, yeah, I think it's a natural progression in as much that I needed somebody to work with, to relate to, if I was going to discover for myself how I was going to write in the future. I needed some help. I couldn't do it myself because I couldn't look at myself properly at the time. And I think I was very fortunate in deciding on such an empathetic git as Zeno to work with, who's an absolutely wonderful man, terrific. And in fact, the funniest thing really is that we spent, I think, for every hour that we recorded in the studio, he has an incredible sense of humour. I don't know whether you know Eno at all. Fripp and Eno and I think spent about 40 minutes of every 60 laughing. I mean, it's just incredibly surrealistic humour that Brian can come up with. And indeed Fripp. Fripp has that, much more down-to-earth type of humour.
Let me ask you about the lyrics, because it seems to me that your lyrics nowadays are becoming more obscure, unfathomable than they used to be.
Yes, they are, aren't they? Yeah. Well, there is a logic behind that. If only I could think of it. No, what I did, I'm working very much in fragment lyrics now, even more than I ever did. I mean, it started with Diamond Dogs. There are a couple of tracks on that were written with a lot of inspiration due to Burroughs' work. William Burroughs. And I've really taken the plunge on this last album, I suppose. And it's arrived at by putting together 3 or 4 statements at variance with each other, sometimes completely unrelated statements. And from those, say, arbitrary 3 statements, one arrives at a 4th piece of information from the rearrangement of what is involved. Now, that sounds like an awful easy thing to do. Well, it is, and I think everybody should do it.
I remember you telling me something before about writing things down on bits of paper and rearranging them. Is this what you literally do?
Yes, it's the cut-up technique, a cut-up technique. It was a very popular writing form in the 60s. I mean, it's sort of quite reactionary, really. I also like the spontaneous writing, just writing for the sake of it and then rereading it and seeing what came out. So you must understand, I mean, it all sounds incredibly indulgent, and indeed it is, because what I'm trying to do is mould the traditional methods of rock and roll with newer processes. I mean, it is a re-evaluation, and it is trying to find a new form of language, musically, or artistically, I guess, because I'm not a musician, but artistically.
But it does make the lyrics less accessible.
On surface level, but you see, I think that they are very accessible on a subconscious and emotional level. That was the point of cut-up writing, is that it didn't relate to linear thought at all. It worked very much on the spontaneous and immediate images that one gets in one's mind, especially when one's driving. I think it's in incredibly fast shapes and forms. And it can relate very strongly on that level. There's one bohemian half of me which sort of says, I wish they'd never buy another one, then I could go back and be a painter. And the other part says, well, who's going to gratify your ego then? And the other one says, well, I'll be a successful painter.
Well, that really prompts a question I was going to ask you right at the end. But I'll ask it now. I really wanted to know if at any time in your career you'd ever had to ask yourself the question, what the bloody hell am I doing? How did I get into this? I wish I could get out and be an ordinary person.
Oh, God. Yeah, and when Los Angeles, I mean, I was talking to myself and receiving those idiotic replies all the time. I'd quite cut down the middle there. And I really, some particular incident, which I really don't want to go into now, brought me back down to earth with a bump. And that's when I sort of decided to get out of that area of rock and roll that I always used to despise, and found that I'd sort of got myself involved in without really seeing that I was getting involved in it. And sort of dropped out again, to use an old term, and get back on my old Kerouac road and just travel again, just to help me reevaluate, as I say. And so, along with that, being a personal problem, it applied to my work, of course, as it must do, because with me, the way I live is very much also part of what produces my work. So I have to keep examining my life to make sure that I'm in constant change and not getting too bloated with philosophic opulence. Keep sort of throwing bits and pieces away. And to change countries is one way of doing that.
Well, let me change tack. If I were to have one criticism of the Bowie of today, the Bowie on Low and Heroes, I'd say that we don't seem to be getting as much of your vocals as we used to do. In fact, I mean, almost the whole of the second side of Heroes is instrumental. I think that's a very great pity.
What can I say? I've only written that many songs, and the rest of it was instrumental. Yes, I'm sorry.
But you're obviously very happy with this album, I think you were saying earlier.
I'm happy with the album. I'm also happy with life in general, actually. I'm very content at the moment. I hope it goes on like this. It would be super. Yeah, there's a communication prospect with them approaching it when we approach any album, which is one knows that one's already defined one's area with them. I mean, we don't have to talk very much before we start playing anything.
You mean you've developed your own language or
yes,
communication system?
Definitely. Yes. A bit like bats.
With these last two albums, you've certainly settled down into what is a more stable situation, I think. Does that mean that you're no longer the chameleon, or did you tire of creating new faces, new images for yourself?
Yes, I did tire of it. They were starting to get me down, in the States especially. I had all these people. I'll tell you a funny story about that. When I left Los Angeles, the way I psychologically rid myself of all those people for a bit was to open a wardrobe door and to push them in mentally, and then I locked the wardrobe door and I've still got the key, which I think is a sort of hedging one's bet, really. I mean, if I'd gone all the way, I should have thrown the key away, but I didn't.
Does that mean that when you came over to Europe, you really had quite enough of LA and its people, or what?
Not only LA and its people, but my approach to writing. I was tiring of the method that I was writing in. I wanted to develop a new language, and so I knew that my next move was to have to do that.
When I said I wanted to talk about the last two albums, my feeling about Low was, and you've already talked about Eno, was that there was as much Eno on that album as there was David Bowie. Is that a good thing, David?
I think there was an awful lot of Eno influence on the album. I think that sort of is fairly to be expected. I mean, when one works with somebody that one admires, one tends to sort of move more in their areas and give them wider berth for showing you something new. And I think that was fairly evident on Low. Although proportionate amount of work done was about equal. It was a collaboration, no doubt about that. I would be wary of committing myself to saying that it was one-sided on either part, though. This new album is even more successful blending of what we're doing, I think. Not quite so obviously this or that. It's a highly successful collaboration, the new one. And with the addition of Fripp as middleman, I think that helps an awful lot as well.
You've produced a couple of albums with Iggy, and my feeling is that he is becoming very Bowie-esque.
Well, you know, I think there was probably a little bit too much of me than was necessary on Idiot, but I think that was more because Iggy was still feeling his way again after a considerable absence from things. But I would tend to disagree. I think Lust for Life is far more like the old Iggy than anything he's done for a long time. And he really is very much his own boss, you know. I think that he's been able to shake my phantom off fairly quickly, considering, which is, I know it's unfortunate, but never a time I get involved with an artist, I mean, I That always tends to be one of the criticisms levelled at anything that comes as a result of our working together. But I think Iggy's going to get even stronger in the future.
So you do think you've avoided most of the inherent dangers in that sort of professional relationship?
I don't know, you see. I mean, I hope so, for his sake. I mean, you know, it's... and he seems very happy with things as they are. He fully intends to do another album with me, so I can't see that we've gone very wrong as far as he's concerned, and it's him that it's all about. So it's most important that he feels at ease with the situation.
OK, well, the producer's just been giving us the wind-up here, so let me ask you a couple of quick questions, right? You seem to have been spending a bit of time over here recently. At least, you know, if one looks at the press, we've seen your photograph on various occasions. Have you...
Yeah, that's misleading, actually. I've been over here quite a bit, yes, but I've also been in the Far East a lot. But I fly a lot, you see, now. And so I fly, it makes it seem as though I'm here a lot because I keep popping in and out. But I often try and get back to Japan as much as possible because I haven't finished looking around there. Yeah.
Is that going to be your next base, do you think?
Funny you should ask that. It might well be.
OK, just one more question then. If we could look at your diary for the next few months, what's planned for you? Rather obvious answer. I'm going to travel. I'm doing nothing but travelling for the next up until at least December. A few countries I want to go. Israel, South America and Africa is what I intend to do. And what about the tour?
Sometime next year, depending on the film that I'm doing.
And the film you're doing, is this something of your own creation? Or?
No, it's was brought to my attention by Clive Donner. It's a period of the life of an expressionist painter called Egon Schiele. And it's around the period 1900-1918 and takes place in Vienna and Paris. And it's just a sort of an intimate portrait of his relationship with his model. Not too intimate. It's not a sensationalist. Just good cuisine, you know, good food, that kind of thing.
OK, we will look forward to it and look forward to the tour as well. Thanks, David.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.